It was a dark and stormy night in the quiet village of Durgapur. Rain poured relentlessly from the sky, beating against the deserted streets. The flickering streetlights barely held the shadows at bay, and the village, soaked and silent, seemed to be holding its breath. Inside the local police station, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Officer Kumar and his colleagues sat in silence, their faces etched with exhaustion. The dim light overhead flickered as the cold air filled the room. Their recent victory, arresting the notorious criminal, Rakesh, brought little relief. Rakesh, a man known for his cruelty, sat arrogantly in the holding cell, his smirk visible even through the rusty bars. As the officer stared at him, the tension only deepened. Rakesh's face, bruised but defiant, betrayed no fear. He leaned back against the cell wall, watching them through the bars with a sense of superiority. Outside, the rain hammered down harder, adding to the unsettling atmosphere inside the station. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Officer Kumar hesitated for a moment, then slowly rose from his chair. His hand hovered over the doorknob, uncertainty flickering across his face. He opened the door cautiously, but found nothing, only the empty street, washed in rain. His eyes searched the darkness, but there was no one there. As the cold wind rushed inside, he closed the door quickly, feeling the tension rise. Inside his cell, Rakesh began to shift uncomfortably. His arrogance gave way to something else, something darker. His smirk faded, replaced by beads of sweat forming on his brow. His eyes darted nervously around the room, and he leaned forward as though he could sense something lurking beyond the walls. And then it began, the whisper. Soft at first, like a distant echo, but slowly it grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from every corner of the room, yet from nowhere at all. The officers exchanged glances, their faces pale with confusion and fear. The whispers grew, wrapping around them like invisible tendrils. Rakesh's eyes widened in terror. His hands gripped the bars of his cell, knuckles turning white. His arrogant demeanor crumbled as his expression shifted from confusion to fear. He strained his ears, trying to locate the source of the whispers, but they seemed to fill the very air around him. Then, in the corner of the room, she appeared. Dr. Anjali. Her white doctor's coat billowed as if moved by an unseen breeze, and her face, once full of warmth and kindness, was now cold and sorrowful. Rakesh gasped, backing away from the bars. The room grew darker, shadows creeping along the walls, as Dr. Anjali's gaze locked on him. Her eyes, once filled with compassion, now burned with a quiet, seething rage. The tension in the room thickened, and the air grew colder. The officer stood frozen, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Rakesh, once so proud and fearless, crumpled to the floor in his cell, his body shaking uncontrollably. He whimpered softly, his arrogance shattered by the horror unfolding before him. Rakesh gasped, his body frozen in fear. Her cold gaze bore into him as his chest tightened. His breath grew shallow, and his eyes bulged in terror. Rakesh's lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor of the cell, his once smug face now twisted in a permanent expression of fear. The room was still. The officers stood in stunned silence, their minds unable to process what had just transpired. Dr. Anjali slowly faded from the room, her presence lingering only as a faint chill in the air. The police station, once filled with chaos, was now eerily calm, as if nothing had ever happened. Outside, the storm began to calm, the rain easing to a gentle drizzle. The village of Durgapur stood in silence, shrouded in a heavy stillness, as if the very air was holding a secret it could not reveal.